The katana rests in its scabbard, its slender curve cradled by the smooth, lacquered saya, the wood worn by countless draws and sheaths, polished to a sheen by time and reverence. The air is thick with the dry, grassy scent of tatami, mingling with the faint, earthy aroma of freshly whisked matcha, steam curling lazily from the chowan in unbroken spirals. Beyond the paper-thin shoji screens, the world of Edo stretches in hushed harmony. The rhythmic clatter of geta on cobbled streets, the muffled laughter of merchants, the distant call of a peddler hawking his wares, each sound softened by the weight of peace, like footsteps muffled in snow. The blade hums silently in the silence, its steel remembering the chaos and cries of Sekigahara, the shudder of armor, the scent of blood and burning straw. Yet now, there is only stillness. My master sits in seiza upon the mats, his breath slow and measured, fingers resting lightly on his knees, the fabric of his hakama crisp and unmarred by battle. The room is suffused with the golden glow of late afternoon, dust motes drifting lazily in slanting beams of light, the wood grain of the tokonoma alcove whispering of ancient trees that once stood unbowed by storm or sword. A sparrow alights upon the engawa, its tiny claws tapping the worn cypress, head tilted as if listening to the blade's unspoken discontent. The master exhales, and his fingers twitch just once toward my hilt, a phantom impulse buried beneath discipline. I remember the way his grip once tightened in fury, the way he carved through men as though cleaving wheat, the way the moon glinted off my edge in the dead of night, when honor was written in blood. Now the only cuts he makes are through air, in kata rehearsed 1,000 times, my edge never tasting flesh, only the phantom resistance of the past. The tea grows cold, the wind stirs the bamboo outside, leaves rustling like the ghosts of fallen foes, restless and unavenged. He slides me from the saya with a sound like winter ice cracking a whisper, yet deafening in the quiet room, and for a moment, we are one again, vibrating with latent purpose. Yet there is no enemy, only the calligraphy scroll hanging in the alcove, its brushstrokes fluid as a river, the ink declaring, the mind honed by stillness cuts sharper than steel. The master's knuckles whiten, then relax. He breathes and I sheath myself in darkness once more, sheathed not in violence, but in waiting like the cicada beneath the earth, like the moon behind clouds. The peace is heavy, unbearable, and yet, when he lifts the tea to his lips, bitter and bracing, his pulse is steady as the turning of the seasons. Perhaps this is the harder battle. Perhaps this is the edge we must master now. The clean scent of freshly woven tatami mingles with the faint, earthy bitterness of matcha left cooling beside me. Steam long dissipated among the still air of the dojo. The soft rustle of silk against skin whispers just below the quiet rasp of his breath deep, controlled as my owner kneels upon the wooden floor, his weight barely shifting the ancient boards worn smooth, by generations of devoted practice. His hands, calloused yet precise, hesitate for the span of a single heartbeat before lifting me free of my saya. The whisper of steel against lacquered would almost spectral in the hush of dawn. The faintest tremor in his fingertips betrays the weight behind the motion, not of fatigue, but of reverence, of memory. I recall the nights beneath plum blossoms, the way rain slid along my blade as men fell to their knees in the mud, their lives fluttering out like dying lanterns. Now, though, the only blood that touches me is the occasional prick of his thumb, careless in his devotion, proof that even now, after years of peace, he still moves with the controlled violence of one who has known war. The damp cloth glides over my curve, slow as a lover's caress, each stroke chasing echoes of battle from my surface until only clarity remains. Outside, the patter of geta against cobblestones drifts through the paper-thin walls like distant ghosts of urgency. But here, time stretches, thick with contemplation. His breath steadies as he works, tracing the Hammond's undulating waves, each ripple a testament to fire and fold, to destruction wrought anew into beauty. What purpose now? The unspoken question lingers in the glint of my edge, in the way his gaze lingers on the empty training yard beyond the shoji doors, where dew-kissed grass bends under no opponent's footfall. The wars of his youth have faded into scrolls and hushed tales. The fires that once forged him have cooled to embers. Yet the rhythm of his hands does not falter. The cloth circles once more, methodical, relentless, not for necessity, but for the sake of motion itself. He inhales the scent of oil camellia, faintly floral as though it were an invocation. And in the silence, I feel the pulse of his heart sink with the distant tolling of a temple bell. Perhaps mastery is not found in the clash of steel alone, but in these quiet acts of preservation, in the refusal to let stillness dull what battle once honed. His fingers tighten around my tsuka, not to strike, but to remember the balance, the weight of responsibility. The sun climbs higher, painting the wooden floor in gold. And for this suspended heartbeat, we are both blade and bearer, edge and hand unyielding. Even in peace, the tatami mat exhales the faint fragrance of dried straw beneath me, mingling with the acrid, yet soothing aroma of freshly whisked matcha, a scent that lingers like an unspoken promise in the still air. My master kneels before me, his fingers resting lightly upon my tsuka, and though his touch is steady, I sense the quiet tremor beneath his skin, betraying the restlessness he will not name. The whisper of my blade leaving the saya is sharper than the cicadas humming beyond the shoji door, a sound clean enough to cut time itself once, twice, then swallowed again by silence. He inhales, slow and deliberate, as if drawing in the weight of an era, and the honeyed light of dawn spills across my hamon, turning the steel into liquid fire. The tea sits untouched beside him, its bitterness a phantom on his tongue, a reminder of rituals now hollowed by repetition. Outside, The rhythmic clatter of geta against cobblestones feels distant, trivial, as though the world has forgotten the true purpose of footsteps, that they once carried men toward battles, not bargaining tables. The silk of his hakama whispers against the polished wooden floor, grain visible beneath layers of wax worn smooth by generations of such motionless mornings. He hesitates before lifting me, and in that pause, memories surge between us, the tension of bowstrings singing through the air, the iron tang of blood blooming on snow, the drumbeat of hooves as armies clashed in the ash-streaked dawn. Now, there is only stillness. His fingers trace the curve of my kasaki, lingering where the edge has dulled from disuse, and I feel his doubt like a rust creeping in. Should a sword remain sheathed when its wielder's soul was forged for war? The meticulous scrape of the whetstone against my flank echoes like a monk's chant, each deliberate stroke an incantation to a fading deity. He closes his eyes, but not before I catch the flicker of shame, for craving the very chaos his ancestors sought to end. The weight of peace is heavier than armor. It presses upon his ribs with every undisturbed sunrise, mocking the fire still coiled in his muscles. The garden beyond whispers through the open, amato, maple leaves, trembling like the hands of old men recounting battles no one wishes to hear. Even the breeze seems reluctant, carrying only the perfume of chrysanthemums when once it bore smoke and screaming. His jaw tightens as he lifts me into the kami, limbs moving with the precision of a shadow puppet, perfect, rehearsed, bloodless. The strike is flawless, severing nothing but the vacant air, and the emptiness howls louder than any battlefield. His breath hitches, not from exertion, but from the unbearable clarity that mastery without purpose is a prayer cast into a void. Sweat beads at his temple, not from the heat of combat, but from the slow suffocation of a warrior drowning in tranquility. As the final pose holds, his reflection glimmers in my surface, a face honed by discipline, yes, but eyes starved for meaning. Somewhere a temple bell tolls, and his shoulders sag as though the sound has judged him. To the world, he is the image of control. To me, he is a blade sheathed in silk, screaming silently against the dark. Yet when he returns me to the stand, his fingertips linger, and in that touch, I feel the first fragile stirrings of acceptance. Perhaps peace is not the enemy, but merely another frontier to conquer. The tea has cooled when he finally drinks, the bitterness now carrying a strange sweetness, like the first thaw after a long winter. He smiles, just slightly, and in that moment, we are both transformed not by the clash of steel, but by the quiet courage to embrace stillness as the ultimate test of spirit. The morning air is thick with the lingering scent of incense, its tendrils curling through the quiet stillness of the chamber where he kneels, motionless. The tatami beneath his knees is firm yet yielding, its tightly woven straw faintly carrying the memory of summer fields, and the wood of the floor beneath hums, with the slightest draft slipping through the gaps in the shoji screens. I feel him before I see him, his fingers ghosting along my saya, hesitant, as if questioning the necessity of this ritual in a world where battle is now found only in the hollow clatter of bamboo practice swords. His breaths are measured, deep inhalations of the cool, damp dawn air. Yet beneath the controlled rise and fall of his chest, I sense the tremor of something darker, an unrest he refuses to name. His hands, usually steady as stone when he lifts me, betray the faintest hesitation as he loosens the sagio, the silk cord whispering against the lacquered wood before slackening. When he draws me, the sound is barely a breath, a sigh of parted steel, but it resonates in the hollow silence of the room like the first drop of rain upon still water. He pauses, as he always does, savoring the quiet communion of the edge between light and shadow, his reflection a ghost upon my polished surface. Yet today, my blade catches more than the morning sun's muted glow. It reflects the tension in the set of his jaw, the way his eyes dart across my length, as if searching for answers I cannot give. His thumb tests the edge, pressing lightly until skin yields just enough to leave no mark, a habit born of countless mornings. The proof of discipline laid bare in restraint. But now, even that act feels restless, impatient, as though his body remembers the weight of purpose my steel once carried, not for meditation, but for severing fate itself. The winds outside carry the distant clatter of geta upon cobblestones, the rhythm of merchants and monks, the living heartbeat of an Edo that has forgotten the taste of war. Does he envy them? Does he resent the peace that has made him a relic, his devotion to mastery now a dance without a stage? He exhales, slow and deliberate, but the breath shudders at its end, betraying the storm beneath. Once his grip upon me was unshakable. Now his fingers flex ever so slightly, as if aching for a weight I no longer bear in truth. The bitter scent of matcha spills into the air as he lifts the cup beside him, its steam curling like distant battlefield smoke. And for a moment, his gaze drifts beyond my edge, beyond the walls, to some unseen horizon where his spirit still wanders, untethered. The tea is too hot. He drinks anyway, welcoming the sting as punishment or perhaps as proof that he still feels, still burns beneath the veneer of calm. The taste lingers, sharp and clean, a fleeting reminder of clarity, but it is not enough to silence the whispers in his blood. He returns me to my saya with the same reverence as always, my blade vanishing like a secret between the wooden lips of the scabbard. Yet the slide is slower today, as if he fears the moment when I will no longer be needed at all. The morning light shifts, casting long fingers across the floor, and in that quiet, I hear the echo of his yearning for battle, for stillness, for the elusive equilibrium where mastery is enough. The wind stirs again, carrying with it the faint pollen of cherry blossoms from some unseen tree. And for the first time, he does not smile at the reminder of transience. Instead, his fingers tighten around me briefly, fiercely, as if he could fuse my steel to his soul, and in that grip I feel it. Beneath the discipline, beneath the meditation, the warrior still dreams of unsheathing beneath an open sky, where purpose is as simple as breath, and peace is not surrendered but earned. The evening air hung thick with the mingled scents of burning incense, and the faint earthiness of dampened tatami mats, the straw fibers exhaling memories of countless such gatherings beneath their weathered surface. Across the room, his peers sat in rigid seiza, their postures immaculate, yet he could feel the restless energy beneath the stillness, like the quiet before a storm that refused to come. The sharp, metallic whisper of a katana being drawn in demonstration sliced through the murmurs, its sound crisp as winter frost. And for a heartbeat, the world shrank to that single, gleaming edge. Deep breaths punctuated the silence, not just his own, but those of the others too, the rhythm unsteady, betraying the disciplined calm they all pretended to command. The taste of bitter green tea lingered on his tongue as he sipped from the chowan, the porcelain impossibly smooth beneath his calloused fingers, its heat an echo of his own restless pulse. Outside, the rhythmic clatter of geta on cobbled streets wove through the night, a fleeting reminder of a life beyond the dojo's walls ordinary, unburdened by the weight of steel and legacy. He exhaled slowly, watching as the steam from his cup curled like smoke from a battlefield pyre, and the rustle of his silk kimono against the polished wood floor seemed deafening in the hush. The lanterns flickered, casting shadows that stretched like grasping hands across the screens, and for a moment, the faces around him blurred into those of long-dead comrades, their voices melding with the living, speaking of honor and duty in the same breath as nostalgia for bloodshed. His fingers twitched against his thigh, aching for the grip of his sword, not for battle, but for the certainty it once offered the clarity of purpose that peace had dulled. A moth beat against the lantern's paper shield, its wings frantic, and he wondered if he, too, was trapped in this fragile, golden glow, suspended in an endless twilight between war and wisdom. The scent of sake crept into the room, rich and cloying, and with it came laughter hollow, edged with something brittle, as though they were all pretending to forget the hollowness in their own chests. He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his own blade at his side, cold and silent, and imagined the first light of dawn spilling across the training yard, the way the dew-kissed grass would bend beneath his feet as he moved through the kata, step by deliberate step, seeking not victory, but the fleeting moment when body and breath and blade became one. The voices around him rose and fell like distant waves, their words dissolving into the night, carrying with them the prayers of men who no longer knew if gods listened to warriors without wars to fight. The wind sighed through the eaves, whispering secrets of cherry blossoms that would bloom and fade before their time, and in that breath he understood. Peace was not the absence of struggle, but the mastery of stillness, and the sword, like the soul, was meant to be unsheathed only when the heart was ready. The polished steel of my blade catches the morning light, scattering delicate shards of gold across the worn tatami. Mats their faint scent of straw and earth, barely discernible beneath the crispness of freshly brewed tea. Steam curling in slow, meditative spirals from the chowin resting beside him. His fingers tighten along my saya, the black lacquer cool beneath his calloused grip, releasing the faintest whisper of wood on silk as I slide free. Inch by agonizing inch, not the ringing declaration of battle, but a ghost of sound, a ritual already rehearsed through countless dawns. The air in the dojo carries the mingled musk of sweat and pine resin from the beams above. Pressed into each breath he takes long and deliberate, as if he could draw stillness directly from it. But I feel it, the tremor in his wrist, the restless pulse at his throat. His warrior's spirit still hums like a low flame, a remnant of generations steeped in the clang of steel and cries of battle, now buried beneath years of enforced peace, a fire smothered by the weight of scrolls and courtly decorum, yet never fully extinguished. The rhythmic tap of distant geta on cobblestones drifts through the open shoji, merging with the sleepy chirp of sparrows in the garden. It is a song of ordinary life, unbroken and unburdened, yet it only tightens the coiled tension in his shoulders. How many times has he stood just so, the edge of my blade poised above the candle's flame to test its temper, wondering if the same fire that forged me still burns within him. His gaze dips to the untouched tea, its bitter fragrance an old companion, and memories unfurl like banners in his mind, his father's hands teaching him to grip me properly. The stories of lightning-quick duels that ended in a single stroke. The ache of a body too long denied the test of its own limits. Even now, sweat beads beneath the worn thin silk of his kimono collar, tracing down the rigid line of his spine, though he does not falter, does not dare. He knows, as the mountains know the seasons, that there is another path. The light shifts, slanting sharper now across my length as he exhales, slow and controlled, and with meticulous precision, turns my edge to the sun. In this stillness, in this ritual of discipline and reverence, the turmoil quiets, not gone, but tempered, folded like steel beneath the hammer of patience. It will return, this hunger for purpose, as surely as the tide reclaims the shore. But here, now, in this fragile balance between action and restraint, mastery is not in the swing of a blade, but in the holding back. The first light of dawn crept through the shoji screens like hesitant fingers, touching the tatami mats with a fragile glow. And with it came the crisp, clean scent of fresh tatami mingling with the faint perfume of green tea left from the night before. I let out a slow breath, feeling the air chill my lips still warm from sleep as I shifted onto my knees, the woven straw beneath me whispering against the fabric of my hakama. The ritual began as it always did, the deliberate folding of my robes, the precise positioning of my hands atop my thighs, knuckles barely grazing the silk. But this morning carried an unfamiliar weight inside my chest, like a river stone settled against my ribs as I closed my eyes and tried to still the pulse at my wrists. Silence stretched between the wooden beams of the dojo, so complete I could hear the minute creak of the floor settling, the distant rustle of a sparrow in the eaves. Deeper than that, if I listened hard enough, was the faint, sharp sound of my katana breathing in its saya, nestled against the stand beside me, silent yet unbearably present, like an unfinished thought. How many dawns had I faced this way? And yet, today, the peace I sought felt like sand slipping through my fingers. My breath hitched, uneven too shallow, and I forced it deeper, counting the heartbeats as the morning air, thick with dew, settled softly on my skin. The scent of warmed tea leaves lingered in the back of my throat, bitter yet comforting, a reminder of simpler disciplines, the careful pouring of water, the patient wait for the leaves to unfurl, the perfect stillness of the bowl before drinking. Was serenity meant to be found in such small acts? Or was it supposed to be seized, wrested from the world with gritted teeth and a sword's edge? My fingers twitched, betraying me, and for an unbearable instant, I imagined tearing the blade free, feeling its familiar weight answer me, but no. The hand settled again, trembling only slightly, and I exhaled through my nose, letting the image dissolve. Shadows stretched longer across the floor now as the sun climbed, painting stripes of gold and gray like the bars of a cage or the staves of a song. Distantly, the rhythmic clatter of geta sandals on cobblestone flickered into hearing merchants, laborers, men who had never known the ache of steel in hand, yet their steps were steady, unhurried. Life moved on, indifferent. My jaw tightened. Was this my fate now? To kneel in stillness while the world outside forgot the echoes of war, forgot the men who had once shaped history with their blood. Time bent oddly in meditation, moments stretching like taffy, and suddenly I recalled my teacher's words from years ago. True stillness is not the absence of motion, but the motion beneath the surface, unseen. Had he meant the pulse beneath the skin, the simmering readiness of a coiled spring? Or something quieter, deeper, like the way winter earth still thrums with life underneath? The thought unspooled further memories of training under the old cherry tree behind my master's house, its blossoms swirling down around us, petals catching on the edge of my practice blade. Even then, the paradox had taunted me. The warrior's discipline was one of restraint, yet the spirit within always strained toward battle, toward purpose. That hunger had not dulled, only found no outlet in this era of paper walls and inked treaties. What use was a sword if it never tasted the wind? The bitterness of that thought soured my tongue worse than the tea. Then, a shift, something beyond words, as the sunlight pooled warm on the back of my neck, not chastising but forgiving. The calm I had chased circled closer now, slipping past the defenses like mist between rooftops. Perhaps mastery is not in the wielding, some quiet voice offered, but in knowing when not to. The realization unfurled slowly, fragile as a moth's wing. Peace was not surrender, nor was it resignation. It was the discipline to hold fury like a folded fan closed, deliberate, waiting for the moment it was meant to open. Outside, the monastery bell tolled once, a deep, resonant note that shuddered through the wood beneath me, through my bones, through the unanswered longing in my chest, and then faded, leaving only the echo and the breath that followed. The sword, still sheathed, stood silent beside me, content for now to wait. The days slip by like slow-moving shadows across the shoji screens, and I watch as my owner kneels upon the tatami, the mats beneath him giving off their familiar, clean scent straw warmed by time, mingling with the faintest hint of incense lingering from the morning's prayers. His hands rest upon the low table, fingertips poised just above the smooth expanse of washi paper, unblemished, waiting. The air in the room is still, thick with the quiet hum of discipline, broken only by the occasional whisper of a moth's wings against the lantern's glow. He exhales, long and measured, a deep breath drawn not from necessity, but from ritual, and the soft clink of the inkstone against the water dropper follows, a sound as deliberate as the first step in a duel. The scent of freshly ground sumi ink, earthy and pungent, curls into the space between us, and I catch the way his shoulders ease ever so slightly as he stirs it, the brush's tip grazing the ink's surface, darkening, swelling, before lifting with a precision that would make even the most seasoned warriors pause. His stroke begins no hesitation, no tremor, only the perfect tension of control, and the line flows across the page, black as a midnight river, a testament to the years he has spent honing not just his blade but his spirit. Memories flicker behind his eyes, the echo of steel drawn from the saya, the sharp, singing note of my edge-parting air, the way battle once quickened his pulse. But now, in this stillness, he does not crave the clash of arms, nor the rush of combat. He seeks something deeper, something quieter, a harmony beyond the reach of violence. Each stroke of the brush is a meditation, a silent dialogue with emptiness, a forging of the self as meticulous as the folding of steel. Outside, the world moves on carts rumble through the streets. Merchants call their wares, the rhythmic clatter of geta on cobbled stones marking time's relentless passage. But here, in this room, time bows to his will. He is both warrior and scribe, blade and ink one and the same. And as the final character takes form, I recognize not just the artistry, but the surrender in it, the patience, the focus, the quiet triumph of mastering not an enemy, but himself. The peace he once thought lost to an era of stagnation has instead been found here in the deliberate, unhurried pursuit of perfection, in the spaces between breaths, in the ink-dark lines that will never fade. The morning air clung to my skin, damp with the remnants of night's embrace, carrying the quiet fragrance of dew-kissed pine and the faint, lingering musk of burnt incense from the family altar. The tatami beneath my knees felt rough yet familiar, woven with the echoes of 1,000 mornings, spent in silent communion, some with the blade, others with the emptiness inside me. I inhaled deeply, the scent of freshly whisked matcha sharp on my tongue, its bitterness like the contradictions gnawing at my spirit. The stillness demanded by peace, the restless drumbeat of a warrior's blood. Just as I lifted the chowan to my lips, the sharp cry of a distant crow split the quiet, followed by the hurried shuffle of geta scraping against the courtyard's gravel. My fingers paused mid-motion, the porcelain warm against weathered skin, and I listened, really listened, to the rhythm of those approaching footsteps, each uneven clatter carrying the weight of urgency. Even before the messenger's shadow darkened the shoji screen, I knew, as instinctively as I knew the balance of my sword, that this interruption bore the scent of disruption, not war, not yet, but the possibility of it, slight as the tremor in my grip when I set down the tea. The screen slid aside with a whisper, and there he stood, breathless beneath his conical hat, his wide eyes reflecting the fire I dared not let surface in my own. His words tumbled out like scattered river stones, a dispute over a stolen ox, a wounded farmer, a drunken Ronin boasting prowess he likely did not possess. The mere mention of conflict sent something molten coursing through my veins, a familiar current I had tried and failed to dam with meditation and ink-stained scrolls. My pulse roared suddenly, deafening in my ears, memories flashing unbidden, the clash of steel against steel, the copper-sweet stench of battle, the way the horizon used to bleed crimson at dawn. How long had it been since I had felt useful? Not as a scribe of treaties or a guardian of dusty ancestral rites, but as a blade, honed and certain. The messenger shifted, awaiting my response, and I caught the faint tang of his sweat, salty, desperate, mingling with the ever-present cedar of our surroundings. The house creaked softly around us, as if the very wood groaned beneath the weight of my hesitation. Would I go? Could I still remember what it meant to act, truly act, without the safety of Edo's meticulous order? My gaze flickered to the katana resting in its stand, its lacquered scabbard gleaming dully in the slanting light. Once, I would have drawn it without thought, but now, my fingers twitched with something worse than restraint doubt. Was this the stirring of purpose or merely the ghost of an old hunger? The world outside these walls had grown soft, its edges padded with bureaucracy and measured words. Yet here, in this fragile moment, the wind carried the dissonant hum of chaos, faint but unmistakable. This was not war, no. Nothing so grand, but it was movement, a ripple in the stagnant pond of peace, and my soul strained toward it like thirsty roots toward rain. Go, whispered the spirit of the blade within me. But the man who had spent years perfecting the art of stillness hesitated, caught between the thrill of the call and the shame of wanting it at all. The scent of fresh tatami, woven with the faint sweetness of rice straw, rose from the floor as the samurai knelt, his fingers lingering over my lacquered saya black as still water beneath moonlight. The room exhaled around us, the sliding shoji doors filtering pale amber light, motes of dust drifting like distant stars. The sharp, medicinal aroma of matcha curled through the air, still steaming beside him, untasted, though he had watched the tea master whisk it with the same reverence one might offer a shrine. His breath slowed, deliberate each inhalation, pulling the quiet deeper into his lungs, but beneath his stillness, I sensed the tremor in his pulse, the restless heat beneath his skin. Months had passed since his palm had last pressed against my tsuka, since the grip of his middle and ring fingers had tested the curve of my balance. And now, as he hesitated, I wondered if he feared what my weight would stir in him. Outside, the muted cries of street vendors and the rhythmic clatter of wooden geta on cobbled stones seemed worlds away. His thumb slid along my tsuba, cold iron blossoms under his touch, and in that silence before the draw, I felt him teeter between relief and regret. The sheeing of my blade leaving the saya split the air like a whisper, the sound so clean it seemed to sever the past from the present. Light rippled across my edge, unfurling like dawn over rivers, merciless in its clarity. He held me aloft without flourish, without the pride of war, my point steady toward the open garden where the maple leaves trembled not as enemies, but as surrendering hands. No blood would steal my gleam today. No foe stood at the other end of my path. Only the blur of his reflection wavered in my surface, his breath shallow now, his brow furrowed, wrestling with the question that had gnawed at him through nights of idleness. What is a blade without battle? What is a storm without rain? His fingers tightened, but no command came. The moment stretched, thinning like wet paper against flame, until, with a sigh as soft as a prayer, he eased me back into darkness. The silent click of the koeguchi ceiling shut resonated deeper than any combat cry. The warmth of his grip lingered on my hilt, leaving unanswered the dread that haunted him, that all his years of devotion might now dissolve into the rust of peace, that his discipline might never again be tested, as it once was beneath banners of war. And yet, as he returned to his tea, now cooled, as his gaze settled on the monastery bell tolling in the distance, I sensed another certainty dawning, that mastery was not forged in fury alone, but in the quiet moments where restraint became its own blade. The shadows lengthened, stitching the silence back together, and though no victory cheer would rise today, the stillness around us was not empty. It was full. The evening air is thick with the fragrance of cherry blossoms, petals drifting like whispered promises onto the tatami beneath me, clean, crisp, faintly sweetened by the lingering traces of fresh matcha, cooling in its chowan beside my knee. The tea's bitterness still clings to my tongue, a mirror to thoughts that refuse to soften despite the serenity of this hour. The sky bleeds into twilight, staining the world amber and indigo, and the distant clatter of wooden geta on cobblestones fades as the streets empty peasants retreating into warm homes, merchants rolling shutters closed, lanterns flickering to life like scattered stars. Yet within me, there is no such quiet surrender. My fingers trace the say of my katana where it rests at my side, the silk-wrapped tsuka smooth under my touch, the lacquered wood cool as river stone. I exhale, slow enough to hear the faintest whisper of steel, as the blade shifts imperceptibly in its scabbard, a sound no one else would mark. But to me, loud as thunder, it echoes the tension coiled in my limbs, the restless ache that persists even now in this fragile piece. What does it mean to be a warrior when the earth no longer trembles beneath marching armies? When honor is measured in the stillness of a garden, the elegance of calligraphy, the precision of a tea ceremony? My hand trembles just once before I force it still upon my thigh, fingers pressing into the rough weave of my hakama. I remember my father's hands, gnarled from decades of battle, teaching me to hold a brush with the same discipline as a sword. "The war is over," he'd said, "but Bushido remains." Yet even he could not hide the shadow in his eyes when the wind carried the scent of smith fires from the forge, metal singing, hammers shaping purpose from raw steel. Years have passed since my blade tasted anything but practice straw. And still, I wake some nights with the ghost of battle sweat clinging to my skin, the phantom weight of armor on my shoulders. Above me, a breeze stirs the cherry branches, petals cascading onto my lap, fragile as the piece we've built. One catches on the back of my hand, translucent pink against my scars. How strange to be surrounded by such fleeting beauty when my soul yearns for something everlasting. The tea has gone cold. I lift the chowan anyway, the glaze catching the last light cracks in the ceramic filled with gold, kintsugi broken things made precious, a metaphor my master would relish. But am I to be like this cup, reforged into something ornamental? Or is there still fire in me, banked but unextinguished? The doubt is sharper than any blade. I close my eyes, breathing in the scent of damp earth and distant rain, the perfume of a world that continues, indifferent to my questioning. Somewhere beyond the walls, a nightingale calls a single, piercing note, and in its echo, I hear the answer. The sword is not merely a weapon. It is an extension of the soul, and the soul must learn stillness before it can move without regret. The petals fall. I release the breath I've been holding. There is mastery even in this, in the patience of the moon watching over an unwounded land, in the discipline of a hand that need not strike. The war is over. Bushido remains. The tatami breathes beneath me, its woven strands releasing the faintest scent of aged straw mingled with the fresh, grassy bitterness of matcha still lingering in the air. His fingers calloused from years of gripping a hilt, yet still deft enough to trace the rim of a teacup slide along my scabbard, the wood polished to such smoothness that even the whisper of his touch sends a ripple through the stillness. He exhales, deep and slow, and the sound is the tremor of wind through bamboo, barely there yet resonant in the quiet of the zendo. I know his breath by now, the uneven hitch before meditation, the disciplined control during ai-jutsu, the rare, unrestrained sigh when he thinks no one hears. His thumb rests against my tsuba, not yet pressing, but hovering, testing his own resolve. Outside, the courtyard stones exhale the day's warmth, their quiet heat rising to meet the cooling evening, while beyond the shoji, the rhythmic clatter of geta against cobbles marks the passage of townsfolk who will never know the weight of a blade or the stillness of a mind honed for war in an era that no longer calls for it. He stirs, and the silk of his hakama whispers against itself like distant waves, a sound so soft it almost drowns beneath the pulse in his throat. What use is a sword without battle? He thinks, and I feel the words echo through me, his silent confession. The oil lamp flickers, casting shadows that sway like restless spirits across the alcove, where his kamidana rests, his ancestors' names etched in wood, their victories now stories, their purpose faded into ritual. His fingers flex, and for a moment I wonder if he'll draw me, if the emptiness will drive him to cut the air just to feel the resistance of the world against his edge. But instead, his palm settles flat against my saya, warm and grounding, as though checking for a heartbeat. He remembers his master's voice. The sword is not for killing. It is for perfecting. The scent of incense curls around us. Sandalwood and memory, what once fortified warriors before bloodshed, now only deepens the stillness. Somewhere in the garden, a cricket sings, its solitary chirp measured against the vast quiet, and I wonder if it, too, questions its song in a world that no longer listens. His jaw tightens. He is thinking of his father, of the way he once spoke of battle not with pride, but with pragmatic reverence, like a farmer speaking of the harvest. There was duty in that. Certainty. Now the only enemy is time, the only battleground the mind. He closes his eyes, and I feel it, the weight of his doubt, heavy as armor, tempered by the stubborn ember of discipline still burning beneath. When he finally lifts me, the motion is quiet, sacred almost. The blade leaving the scabbard with a sigh so faint it might be the wind, or his own breath parting from his lips. Moonlight traces my curve, and in that silvered gleam, I see his reflection fragmentary, shifting, a man caught between legacy and longing, between the ghost of war and the grace of peace. His fingertips brush my spine, following the temper line as if reading a scripture only we understand. This is enough, he tells himself. Mastery is not in the clash of steel, but in the hand that holds it. The blade does not tremble, neither does he. And when he returns me to the dark, the peace he seeks settles upon him like the undisturbed dust on an altar, quiet and absolute. The morning air was crisp and faintly perfumed, with the lingering musk of last night's rain-soaked earth, mingling with the clean, grassy scent of fresh tatami beneath my knees. The shoji screens had been drawn open just enough to allow a single blade of sunlight to carve through the dimness of the room. slicing across the polished wooden floor and catching on the delicate curl of steam rising from my untouched cup of bitter green tea. A bead of amber light trembled at the rim. Quivering with each quiet breath, I took each measured inhale, designed to settle the restless weight in my chest. Before I began my daily inspection, my hands moved without thought, fingers tracing the smooth sheath of the katana resting before me like an altar, offering dark lacquer cool as river stones beneath my touch, until the moment I drew the blade free with a whisper of steel against wood, the sound as sharp and fleeting as a winter bird's cry. The steel gleamed faintly in the half-light, but then there, a rust spot, small as a freckle, blooming like a stain on the otherwise flawless surface near the tang. My breath hitched. The world narrowed to that single blemish, insignificant yet devastating. Had I neglected to oil it properly after last week's rain? Or worse, had days, weeks, passed without my hands even lifting it in practice? The thought coiled inside me like a slow poison. This was no ordinary neglect. It was the abandonment of purpose, of discipline. My father's voice echoed derisively in memory. A blade untested grows dull. A warrior idle grows weak words spoken, as he corrected my stances as a boy. His own swords gleaming even in the dim lamplight of our ancestral hall. How many nights had I spent in those halls, muscles burning, sweat slick on my brow, dreaming of battles that would never come. Edo basked in peace, the streets outside humming with merchants hawking silk and sweet machi, children laughing past our gates, the rhythmic clatter of geta on cobblestones, a far cry from the battlefield's thunder. And here I knelt, a relic of an age slipping away, my sword rusting not from blood, but from time. The ache in my chest deepened as I reached for oil and cloth, movements deliberate each pass of the cloth over the steel, mirroring the motions my mind made over the past, searching for fractures in my resolve. Was this what my life now was? Ritual without meaning, practice without purpose. The cloth faltered, my fingers tightening against the hilt. But beneath the frustration, another whisper stirred. Rust could be removed. A blade could be restored. The katana had not forgotten its edge, nor had I. Not truly. The same patience required to lift sweat from steel was the patience that had carried me through years of stillness, waiting for a war that might never arrive. Perhaps there was honor in this battle, the unseen struggle to master not just the sword, but the self. The rust would fade, and when it did, the steel beneath would be all the brighter for it. The tea had grown cold by the time I sheathed the blade, but the sun had climbed higher, filling the room with warmth. I closed my eyes, exhaled, and began again. The careful scrape of the polishing stone across my blade is a whisper against silence, methodical as prayer, the rhythm steady enough to match the pulse of his breath. The scent of tatami mats lingers in the sun-warmed air, mingling with the faint bitterness of freshly whisked matcha settled on the corner of the low table, steam spiraling upward only to dissolve into nothingness. Beyond the shoji screens, the garden hums the drowsy song of cicadas. The occasional whisper of bamboo leaves brushing against one another, as though exchanging secrets. His fingers hesitate, calloused yet reverent, tracing the spine of my saya, such smooth, dark lacquer, cool as deep water beneath his touch. The moment before drawing me is taut, like the pause between thunder and rain. There is no hurry, no urgency, only the slow, deliberate unveiling of steel. Light catches the edge of me, scattering fractured brightness across the wooden floor, and I watch as I always do, the way his breath stills just before his grip tightens. This ritual speaks of patience, of understanding that the truest battles are fought within stillness. Outside, Edo thrives in its ephemeral peace merchants call from crowded streets. Footsteps clatter in wooden geta, but none of it touches this room, this moment. How many years has it been since my edge last tasted blood? Decades, perhaps. He wonders, sometimes, if this prolonged tranquility is a blessing or a slow decay, if the warrior spirit within him dulls with every passing, uneventful dawn. But then, as now, he lays me across his lap, watches motes of dust drift through beams of late afternoon light, and exhales. The stone moves again, bite and glide, until the steel gleams with mirror clarity, until his own reflection stares back at him, warped yet unmistakable. His hands, remember, wore the tremor of unspent energy beneath his skin, the weight of purpose, but today, his fingers are steady, unhurried. There is mastery in this, he thinks, not only in the swift, lethal arcs of combat, but in this quiet tending, this refusal to let time erode what is sacred. He knows this act is not merely maintenance, it is meditation. The outside world may forget the necessity of the blade, but here, in this ritual, he honors the duality, both weapon and wielder honed in stillness. Tomorrow, the sun will rise again over Edo's undisturbed streets, and he will fold me back into silk, into shadow. But for now, his fingertips brush the edge just once, testing, and when they come away unharmed, he bows his head, unspeaking, as though in gratitude or grief for the peace that keeps both of us sheathed. The morning mist curls lazily through the dojo, carrying the faint, earthy perfume of damp cedar and the distant tang of iron from the blacksmith's forge. The clean scent of fresh tatami mats mingles with the bitter steam of green tea cooling beside me, its aroma sharp yet soothing, like the first frost of winter. My owner kneels dissolves into seiza upon the polished hardwood, every joint settling with the precision of a temple gate closing at dusk. The deep inhale before his meditation is not just breath, but a ritual surrender. His ribs widen, the silk of his kimono whispering against itself, as though the air itself were a blade sliding free of its saya. The students' young, restless shift like saplings in a quiet wind, their straw sandals rasping against the floor, the sound of my edge being drawn, barely a sigh, ripples through the stillness, and their breath catches as one. My steel sings in the muted light, a silver-blue crescent against the dim warmth of candle glow. Each heartbeat between unsheathing and stillness stretches like the last thread of twilight before nightfall. His fingers, calloused but steady, trace the curve of my tsuka, thumb resting against the tsuba. And I remember how, years ago, those same fingers trembled before battle, not from fear, but from the hunger for a purpose now lost to the stifling peace of Edo. The ritual of teaching forces his mind into the present. The delicate balance of pressure as he guides a pupil's grip, the way their wide eyes mirror his own once did, bright with visions of glory. Yet beneath the discipline, an old unrest lingers like the faint tremors of an earthquake, buried deep beneath Kyoto's cobbled streets. He recalls the reckless fire of youth, the way blood pounded in his ears like war drums, the crude poetry of steel meeting steel. Now, the clatter of wooden bakken in practice is a hollow echo of what once was, though he finds an unexpected grace in its rhythm. His eyes drift to the scroll in the alcove, its ink strokes flowing like water. The sword unsheathed neither cuts nor kills, it is the mind that moves first. The student's laughter, bright as temple bells, pulls him back, and for a fleeting moment, the ghosts of his past the battles, the bloody dawns blur into insignificance. Here, in the giving of knowledge, he glimpses something beyond combat. The slow, deliberate shaping of souls as one shapes a blade, folding patience into the steel of their spirits. The afternoon sun spills through the shoji screens, painting the dojo gold. And as he exhales, the sword in his hands feels lighter. No longer a weapon, but a bridge between what was and what must be. The bitterness of the tea on his tongue fades into sweetness, and the weight of his armor, both steel and memory, softens, replaced by the quiet certainty of a river finding its course after the storm. The morning sun filtered through the shoji screens like liquid gold, pooling along the tatami mats worn smooth from years of quiet devotion. The scent of fresh tea mingled with the clean, grassy fragrance of the straw beneath my master's knees, an offering to ritual, to stillness. But today, my steel awaited a different purpose. He lifted me from the silk-lined saya with the reverence of a monk unrolling sacred sutras. His exhale slow and deliberate, marking the shift between meditation and motion. The rasp of my edge against the scabbard was sharper than the cicadas humming beyond the dojo walls, a whisper of violence held in check. Pupils knelt along the wooden flooring, their spines straight as spears, eyes unblinking as my length caught the light, a sliver of winter against the room's soft warmth. I felt the ripple in his grip, the subtle tremor of memory. Another time, another dawn heavy with the iron scent of blood, when my arc had sung not for instruction but survival. His heartbeat betrayed nothing, though. His hands were steady as he turned me flat, presenting my curve to the youngest among them, a boy whose fingers hovered near my tsuka, with the mix of awe and terror reserved for wild things half-tamed. Press here, his silence instructed, guiding the child's touch along my fuller, the groove where once I'd shed rain and gore alike. Now, I bore only fingerprints tiny, human, and the weight of their expectation. Outside, the rhythmic clatter of geta on cobblestones marked merchants hastening to market, laughter threading beneath the sounds of commerce. So ordinary, so fleeting, the students inhaled as one when he adjusted their stances, tilting my tip toward the ceiling, demonstrating balance in stillness. A sword is not a claw, his quiet voice seemed to say, but a brush, not for tearing, but for tracing the edges of the self. The elder pupil hesitated, then mirrored the grip perfectly. In his eyes flickered the same restless hunger my master had once carried before the years had sanded it into something quieter, deeper. I remembered the first time his palms had sweat against my rayskin, the way his ribs had heaved after battle, alive with the terrible beauty of purpose. Now, his palms were dry, his motions spare as calligraphy. When he let the boy test my weight, the child gasped at the heft of history in his hands, this blade that had known both chaos and the strict, unyielding peace of the dojo. The bridge between what was and what must be. Somewhere beyond these walls, the shogun's peace stretched taut over the land like lacquered paper, brittle in its perfection. But here, in the trembling grip of a novice, the old fire still burned, banked, yes, but patient. Waiting, my master's thumb brushed the mekugi, the peg that bound me to him, and for a breath, I felt it all. The ache of his unused muscles, the ghost of adrenaline, the lingering question of whether a warrior could truly serve in a world that no longer needed war. Then he exhaled, and the lesson continued flowing like ink, deliberate as dawn, one stroke, one breath, one heartbeat at a time. The clean scent of tatami mats and fresh tea lingers in the still air of the dimly lit chamber, mingling with the faint, earthy aroma of aged wood, the bones of a house that has held generations of warriors. Outside, the last light of dusk seeps through the paper screens in pale gold streaks, casting long shadows that drape over the meticulously arranged tea utensils. The chowan, humble yet perfect in its asymmetry, the bamboo whisk resting beside it like a feather plucked from history, the sharp, almost imperceptible hiss of the katana being drawn from its saya would go unheard by most. But to him, it is as clear as a temple bell's strike, a whispered reminder of battles that never came, of a blade honed to perfection for a war that never arrived. His hands, though weathered with time, move with the same deliberate grace they once did in the training yard. Each gesture an echo of cuts he practiced 1,000 times kata turned to choreography. Swordsmanship bent to ceremony. The tea scoop, slender as a willow branch, dips into the powdered green matcha, and he pauses, feeling the texture of the lacquered wood beneath his fingertips, colder than steel, smoother than silk. How many times has he done this? And yet, Each motion is a meditation, an act of surrender to tradition, to the weight of the years, to the silence that stretches beyond this room, beyond Edo itself, into the boundless void that swallows all warriors eventually. The clatter of wooden geta echoes from the distant street, a rhythmic punctuation to the stillness, as a merchant hurries home, his life untouched by the ghost of Bushido, by the hunger of the sword. And yet, in this moment, he finds no bitterness in the contrast, only a quiet understanding. The kettle hums softly over the coals, its song a low affirmation. And as he lifts the whisk, he truly watches the way the steam spirals upward, dissolving like the last breaths of autumn. In his youth, he had imagined peace as stagnation, the slow decay of purpose. But now, with each measured pour of water, he sees it for what it is. A kind of relentless, unforgiving mastery. His pulse, slow and steady, mirrors the deliberate arcs of his wrists. And for the first time in decades, the tremor in his fingers ceases not from strength, but from acceptance. The tea, bitter on his tongue, carries the taste of every morning he has ever lived, every battle left unfought. And as he sets the bowl down, he feels the weight of the katana at his side, not as a burden, but as a companion alive, waiting, still sharp, though its edge has long ceased to hunger for blood. The light fades further, the shadows merging into darkness, and he smiles just slightly because he knows. Peace is not the absence of war. Peace is the discipline to remain motionless in the heart of stillness, to wield devotion like a blade, to master the self until the self is the only battlefield left. And in this silence, this perfect, unbroken silence, he at last hears the voice of the gods. Not in thunder, but in the absence of it. The katana rests beside him, its presence a testament to their shared journey of discipline and self-discovery. The clean scent of rain-soaked tatami mingles with the faint smoke of smoldering incense, curling like whispered secrets toward the wooden rafters, while beyond the shoji screens, the distant hum of cicadas thickens the humid air into something almost tangible, a living breath upon his bare shoulders. His fingertips graze the seiya's lacquered surface, tracing the grain with deliberate reverence, as though reading the history etched into its dark polish. Every battle weathered, every cut perfected, every hour spent beneath the unforgiving sun of drills and repetition. A bead of sweat slips down his temple, meeting the collar of his worn cotton yukata. Yet he does not flinch. His breathing remains measured, a slow tide in sync with the monastery bell tolling somewhere beyond the garden's swaying pines. He knows this blade, knows the exact weight of it in his palm, knows the whisper-thin sound it makes when drawn, a sound like ice splitting on a frozen river. A sound that speaks not of violence, but of inevitability. Once such a noise had quickened his pulse, had carried the promise of purpose, of blood and honor beneath banners fluttering in the wind. Now, it sings of something quieter, of mornings spent in ritual, of calluses worn smooth by the grip of practice, of the phantom ache in his limbs after hours kneeling in zazen, chasing stillness like a hunter stalking prey. The war is over, has been for decades. Yet within him, the old fire flickers still, the warrior's ghost pacing like a caged tiger, restless for a fray that may never come. Through the open window, the breeze carries the murmur of merchants in the street below, the rhythmic clatter of geta on cobblestones, the laughter of children chasing paper lanterns, life, unbroken, unbloodied. Peace. He exhales long and slow, letting his eyelids fall shut. And for a moment, he is a boy again, gripping his first wooden bakken with trembling hands, dreaming of legends. The katana's tsuba glints dully in the fading light, its plain iron unadorned, no crests, no vanity, only function. Like him, once forged in fire, now tempered by time, his fingers curl loosely around the tsuka, not to draw, but simply to remember. The balance, the way the curve fits against the arc of his soul. In another era, this blade would have sung in battle, would have carved his name into history. Now it sings in silence, in the space between breaths, in the rustle of autumn leaves against the veranda. And perhaps that, he thinks, is the greater mastery, to carry the sword without unsheathing it, to hold the storm within, and yet choose the calm. The cicadas crescendo, then cease all at once, as if the world itself holds its breath. Beneath his palm the steel is cool, patient, waiting, not for war, but for him to understand. The twilight air is thick with the fading warmth of the day. A hesitant breeze stirring the paper shoji screens, their delicate frames casting long, trembling shadows against the tatami, the scent of fresh tatami sun-baked straw, and the faint earthiness of woven reeds mingles with the bitter, vegetal aroma of green tea cooling beside him. Untouched for now, his hands, calloused yet supple, rest on his knees, the fabric of his hakama whispering against the smooth wood of the floor as he shifts ever so slightly. The motion, barely perceptible. The katana lies before him, sheathed but present, the lacquered saya catching the last amber light, its reflection a blurred echo of his own face, a face that has known both the fury of battle and the stillness of monasteries. Now softened by years of peace, he exhales, slow and deliberate, the sound almost lost beneath the distant clatter of geta on cobblestone, the rhythmic footfalls of a world moving on without him. The edge of his thumb traces the tsuba, the metal cool against his skin, and for a moment he feels the ghost of every strike he has ever made, every block, every kill, a lifetime compressed into the weight of a single blade. The quiet is punctuated only by the rustling of a single maple leaf outside, scraping against the veranda, a reminder of seasons past and those yet to come. He wonders, not for the first time, what it means to be a warrior when war is a memory, a relic of his father's time, when the path of the sword has narrowed to the confines of ritual and form. The question lingers like the taste of the tea, sharp, cleansing, unresolved. Yet, As the light fades, so too does the restlessness within him, replaced by a clarity as polished as the steel before him. This, he thinks, is mastery, not the absence of conflict, but the balance of it, the way the blade accepts its own edge without flinching. The first stars appear, faint pinpricks in the deepening blue, and he smiles, knowing that peace is not the opposite of war, but its shadow, waiting always to be embraced. The blade whispered home into its scabbard with the softest sigh of lacquered wood yielding to steel, a sound as familiar to me as my own breath. The scent of freshly woven tatami rose from the dojo floor, mingling with the faint, earthy perfume of green tea still warm in its earthenware cup, steam curling like incense toward the rafters where swallows had nested the spring before. Outside, the late afternoon sun spilled gold across the garden stones, igniting the dew clinging to moss-kissed lanterns, while the breeze carried the distant laughter of children chasing fireflies beyond the compound walls, so unburdened, so unlike the weight I had known in other hands, other times. My master knelt in seiza, his palms resting on his thighs, fingertips brushing the rough weave of his hakama. And though his body was still, I could feel the echo of his pulse through the grip wrapped tight around me, steady but alive with unspent energy, like a river checked by a dam. His breath flowed in through his nose, a slow, deliberate current, letting the taste of bitter matcha linger on his tongue, a reminder of the austere beauty of discipline, of the way even the simplest act held meaning when performed with presence. Beyond the shoji screens, the clatter of geta on cobbled streets was a distant rhythm, the heartbeat of a city at peace, a peace that had carved hollows in the souls of warriors who once knew only battle. The silence between each footfall mirrored the silence between the beats of his heart, and I wondered if he too felt the ghost of old wars in that stillness, if he still heard the screams of men, the thunder of hooves, the wind howling over fields of pikes and banners, all sounds that belonged to another age. His thumb traced the curved guard at my hilt, a gesture both tender and restless, as if he sought reassurance in my weight, proof that some truths endured even in this world of paper and ink and quiet contemplation. The sunlight shifted, warming the side of my scabbard where it rested against his hip, and I remembered another master, long ago, whose hands had been calloused from endless drills, whose eyes had burned with the need for victory, for honor written in blood. Yet this man sought mastery of a different kind, the stillness of a pond unbroken by ripples, the precision of a stroke that needed no enemy to give it meaning. A single magnolia petal drifted through the open shoji, settling on the blade's edge before his breath sent it spiraling away. And in that fragile balance of wind and weight, I understood my purpose anew, not to cleave flesh, but to measure the depth of a man's soul, to find in the perfect alignment of form the harmony that eluded wars and empires. The cicadas began their evening song, rising in waves like distant armies mustering for a battle that would never come. And my master exhaled, slow and long, releasing not just air, but something deeper, a tension that had lived in the marrow of his bones, a question that had no answer. His fingers loosened their grip on me, and settling into the smooth silk of his obi, I knew I would never taste the blood and sweat of war again. But the rustle of his robes as he bowed, the quiet click of his prayer beads, the way the setting sun painted the floorboards with fire and shadow, this was enough. This was life, neither wasted nor wanting, but balanced, as a sword is balanced between hand and heart.